Okay, everyone, here we go with video 3 for chapter 20, and in this one we're going to be talking about revolutions in Latin America. Now, so far we've discussed some revolutions sweeping through Europe. None of these revolutions had much in the way of short-term changes. In another part of the world, though, revolutions would spread and result in tremendous change, both short and long-term. This part of the world was Latin America. Now, going back to Columbus's quote-unquote discovery, pretty much all the Americas were claimed by European nations. North America was taken by Britain and France. Most of what today is Central and South America was claimed by either Spain or Portugal. And even the lands of the Caribbean were taken by a number of different European countries. Before we get into the revolutions themselves, let's first discuss the social and ethnic tensions that would lead to these revolutions. Now, Latin America had a very rigid social structure that was based on race. Let's take a look at the social class pyramid here. Now, you first learned these terms last year in chapter 15. Let's review them again, though. Peninsulares. Let me get my pen here. Okay, so up at the top, you've got the Peninsulares. They were called Peninsulares because they were directly from either Spain or Portugal, and together that is a peninsula, so hence the name. And they were considered the most pure blood, and therefore highest on the ladder. Next came the Creoles, all right, underneath them. And they were of pure European descent, but were born in the Americas. Now, the first generation or two were pretty much the same status as Peninsulares, right? Like Peninsulari moves to the Americas, their kids, their grandkids, they're all kind of considered of the same status. But as the generations went on, Creoles began associating less and less with a European country and more with the colony in the Americas. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Now, beneath these were the mixed groups, the Mestizos and the Mulattos. Mestizos were a mix of European and Native American. Right, so that's European and Native American. And mulattoes were a mix of European and African. All right, so European and slaves. Now, even though these groups had European blood, they were always given an inferior status. And eventually, many of them became angry at having their rights denied. And at the bottom of the ladder were the Native Americans and African slaves. So you had a system with ethnic tension built into it. Mestizos and mulattoes were upset with Europeans, and Creoles were tired of being treated secondary by the Peninsulares, right? You had all sorts of problems. Now, at the same time, there were some events happening in other parts of the world that would have a big impact on Latin American independence movements. One was the spread of Enlightenment ideas. Right, we talked about these back in chapter 17. Ideas like consent of the governed, natural rights, okay, right to life, liberty, property, and so forth. Eventually, these made their way to Latin America, and they became especially popular among the Creoles, right, because these were educated landowners. Also, you had the Declaration of Independence. This was itself inspired by the Enlightenment, and in turn, it gave inspiration to Latin American revolutionaries that wanted to copy the revolution that was taking place in North America. Now, the first area where these revolutionary ideas would flare up was on a small island today we call Haiti. In the 1700s, Haiti was a French colony on the western half of the island that was then known as San Domingo. All right, so here's the island. On the western half, you've got Haiti, the shaded green area. And the eastern half was controlled by Spain. Today we call that the Dominican Republic. The majority of Haiti's population were African-American slaves, and they worked on sugar plantations. Now, very rough conditions, okay, they were treated harshly, mortality rates were very, very high among them. And these slaves were inspired by both the American and French revolutions. Right? Word eventually got to them about these uprisings that were taking place. Now the French, obviously, French Revolution, they had a strong connection to because they were a French colony. But in America, they looked at it as having a geographic connection. They thought, hey, we're pretty close by. Maybe we can recreate the same type of circumstances. They also had a formidable leader in Toussaint Louverture. He was a former slave himself, and he was self-educated and a brilliant commander. He is often referred to as the George Washington of Haiti. Now, by 1798, his forces had gained control of Haiti, and they had abolished slavery. The fighting wasn't done, though. In 1802, Napoleon sent a large army to reconquer the colony. Even after Louverture was captured and imprisoned in France, the resistance continued. And in 1803, the French would eventually surrender. They just realized that they were losing too much money and wasting too many resources, so they gave up on Haiti. And in 1804, Haiti officially declared its independence from France. Haiti is very noteworthy in that it was the second revolution in the Western Hemisphere after the U.S. and was the only successful widespread slave rebellion in world history. The Haitian Revolution sent ripple effects throughout Latin America, most notably in Mexico. Mexico was the seat of Spanish power in the Americas. Now, the push for independence was started in 1810 by a priest named Father Miguel Hidalgo. He was a Creole, and that's important to note. Many of the independence movements in Latin America were led by Creoles, who no longer considered themselves Spanish or Portuguese. Even in North America, revolutionary leaders like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson fit this bill. They were of English ancestry, but considered themselves American, not British. And that's the way a lot of people in the Spanish and Portuguese colonies were viewing themselves now as well. All right, back to Hidalgo, though. Even though he was a Creole, his followers were mostly Mestizos and Native Americans. Not too many Creoles supported him because he was calling for radical changes like ending slavery and equality for Native Americans. Given his lack of overall support, his rebellion was unsuccessful, and in 1811, Hidalgo was captured and executed. He became something of a martyr, right, a saint for later revolutionary movements, and the movements would continue with Father Jose Morelos. Now, unlike Hidalgo, Morelos was a Mestizo himself, right? He was of mixed European and Native American ancestry, and he called for similar radical changes that Hidalgo did. And like with Hidalgo, a lot of the conservative Creoles refused to support him, and his rebellion also was unsuccessful. But it did lead to a growing call for independence throughout Mexico. Now, Mexican independence is going to be indirectly impacted by stuff happening in the mother country of Spain. 1820, a new government comes to power in Spain. Powerful Creoles in Mexico thought this new Spanish government might take away more of their rights. So in 1821, the last Spanish viceroy was overthrown, and Mexico officially declared its independence. So we've looked at independence movements in the Caribbean, in Central America, and now we're going to look at South America. South American independence movements have become synonymous with the name Simón Bolivar, known as the Great Emancipator or the Great Liberator. Bolivar was an educated Creole from what today is Venezuela. And like other revolutionaries of the time, he was inspired by Enlightenment writers, okay, natural rights, consent to the government, all that stuff we just mentioned. In 1810, he led an uprising that won independence for Venezuela. He then led independence movements in other countries, all right? So in 1780, a couple decades before we're talking about, this is what South America looked like, all right? This Viceroyalty of New Granada, that's where Bolivar was from. But you notice all throughout here, these areas, all right, all under Spanish control, Viceroyalty of Brazil, Portugal, right? And this is New Spain. So all of this is Spain. Spain controlled pretty much all of Central America, most of South America, even a chunk of North America as well. So this independence movement in Venezuela is eventually going to spill over into independence movements in Colombia, all right, which is right here, Ecuador, which is right beneath it, Peru, and Bolivia as well. All right, and Bolivia obviously would take its name from Bolivar. So what we have here, let me show you. All right, all of these shaded areas are regions that were liberated by Bolivar. Venezuela, as I said, where he's from, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. All right. So in 1821, he joins forces with another revolutionary leader, Jose de San Martin. He was from Argentina. Argentina is farther south, kind of at the bottom of South America. And by 1822, the combined forces had completely driven Spain from South America. Now, Bolivar dreamed of uniting all the lands he liberated into a single nation like the United States. Now, this dream of a single united South America failed, unfortunately. Right? There was just rivalries, power struggles. It split the region into several different countries. Why is this not working? There we go. Okay. That we still have today. All right. So this is what he envisioned to be Gran Colombia, which today would be Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, even a little bit of Panama up here in Central America. But it just didn't work out. Okay. But still, the impact that they had. Let's take a look at these two maps. All right, so this is Latin America in the in about 1800 here on the left-hand side. You see how all of this is Spanish. You got Brazil in here. You know, even in the Caribbean, you've got different Spanish territories and French colonies and Dutch colonies. And then look by 30 years later, independent countries. That's in purple here. everything, right? You got Mexico up here in 1821. You've got all of these Spanish territories in Central America and South America here that gained their independence mostly through Bolivar. And then Brazil as well. We didn't talk about it in the video, but they gained their independence from Portugal at this time. So massive, massive changes in a relatively short amount of time. All right, so that wraps things up, not only for this section, but also for this video.